What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everyone's doing well out there. Today we're talking about the running backs that we're going to start and sit here for Week 13 fantasy football. There's some studs with some pretty difficult matchups here this week, but luckily we're not really killed with bye weeks, right? That'll happen next week when there's like 6 teams on bye. This week, only the Carolina Panthers and the Arizona Cardinals, so no James Conner, no Donta Foreman, but a lot of other options to look at, and we're not going to waste a whole lot of time. However, real quick, face it, fellas, it's butt to couch season. Right now, there's football on TV 5 days a week, and you know the good food and the brewskis are a-flowing. Luckily, True Classic Tees has the best fitting clothes that a man can buy. A little tight in the arms and the chest, and a little bit looser in the torso section because we aren't about to shame people with beer bellies nowadays. If your special someone's gonna be mad at you for watching football 20 hours a week, you might as well at least look good doing it. But it's not just t-shirts, it's polo shirts, it's workout shirts, it's boxer briefs that are super soft, by the way. Let me tell you, it doesn't matter if you're an offensive line size dude, a tall dude, or just a regular dude, True Classic Tees has your back, and it's time to upgrade your wardrobe. For a limited time only, head over to trueclassic.com, use the code word headliners at checkout, and receive 25% off your order. Plus, if you spend over $100, you're also gonna get free shipping. I know you've heard the saying, look good, feel good. Well, right now, I'm feeling pretty freaking good. So once again, head over to trueclassic.com, use that referral code headliners at checkout, 25% off your order, links in the description. That's right, sitting here all nice and comfy in my True Classic tee. I mean, honestly, full disclosure, I bought these shirts way before they were a sponsor of this show, so they're really good shirts. Trust me, take my word for it, get some of them, they're super comfy. But anyway, now is what you've been waiting for. Let's dive into some running backs here for Week 13, kicking off Thursday Night Football with the Buffalo Bills and New England Patriots. And as much as I like Devin Singletary, as of right now, he has just become a touchdown-dependent running back because the passing work is all but gone over the last 3 weeks. And maybe you can look back to it and say, well, it's probably because they traded for Nyheim Hines, right? Or maybe it's because they're getting James Cook more involved. No, that's not really the case either. None of these guys getting consistent volume in the backfield, especially when it comes to pass catching works. I don't even know why they traded for Nyheim Hines when the guy isn't even playing out. Makes no sense. I like Nyheim Hines a lot. He could add something to this team, but I guess he's just a luxury at this point. When you look at Devin Singletary, though, he's averaging right around 14 touches per game, but this is not an easy matchup. It's a Thursday night game on top of that. Plus, going up against the Patriots, right now, they only allow 14.2 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. That is second fewest in the league. This is still a team dealing with a lot of injuries. They could have center Mitch Morse back this week, though. That's something we're paying close attention to. But with all that touchdown dependency in a Thursday night game, which is typically lower scoring and boring in a difficult matchup, we're chasing touchdowns, and I don't know if I want to chase it right now with Devin Singletary, so he's going to be a sit. How about his opponent, Ramondre Stevenson season? That's right, it continues because Damian Harris more than likely not going to play in this game, and we're loving ourselves some Ramondre Stevenson. We're looking at Damian Harris with that thigh injury, and how long could that really keep him out? That's something we'll talk to the doc a little bit later in the week about, but right now, Ramondre Stevenson currently running back 11, and the touchdowns have slowed down some, which sucks. But right now, what's really helping, it's the pass catching work right now. He's had at least 6+ targets in 5 straight ball games and is averaging over 18 touches per game on the season. But now he's going up against Buffalo. That's okay. The Buffalo Bills right now are allowing over 19.5 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of their defense being questionable and injured every single week. But with Damian Harris not going to be playing more than likely, this offensive line isn't exactly a model of full health either. We got Isaiah Wynn, David Andrews, Yadni Kajust. They're all questionable to play here this weekend, but Ramondre Stevenson hasn't scored less than 14.5 fantasy points in a game in which Damian Harris did not play. Once again, we're firing up Ramondre Stevenson season. But that's going to take us over to Sunday football now. The Pittsburgh Steelers and Atlanta Falcons, and right off the top, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and Najee Harris. He was finally, it took forever, it felt like, but he was finally starting to score some fantasy points, and now we have to deal with yet another injury. Still unclear at the time of this recording whether or not he's going to play, but as of right now, I have to think he's in jeopardy of missing this ball game with an abdominal injury. He was ruled out super quick in the game last week. It wasn't like, maybe he can come back. No, he got hurt. He went to the locker room. He was ruled out. That's never a good sign. So I guess we need to take a look a little bit at Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland. Now, when Najee went down, Benny Snell is the guy who got more touches. He out-touched Anthony McFarland 13-8, but obviously both of them were being used in this offense, and if Najee sits, you better get used to seeing that once again. This is not going to be just a one-for-one plug-and-play. No, it's going to become more of a committee-style backfield, which is not great for fantasy football, but the matchup isn't bad. They're going up against Atlanta. Atlanta allows the 9th most fantasy points to opposing running backs at 21.9 per game. Aside from the Najee injury, Pittsburgh getting a little bit healthier here towards the end of the season, but we really need to wait and see. As of right now, I'm kind of expecting Najee Harris to sit, but I'm not a doctor, and I'm not in the locker room with him right now. It just kind of seems that that's the way that they're trending at this time. If that's the case, who am I looking at? Because this is a good matchup. For me, it's Benny Snell. He's not flashy, he's not overly exciting by any means, but he could be the guy that leads this backfield and is capable of 20-plus touches. Is he going to get a lot of pass catching work? No, probably not, but with the improvements to Kenny Pickett's game, he's pushing the ball down the field more. They need somebody between the tackles to keep the defense honest. Honestly, right now, that suits Benny Snell just a little bit more. As of right now, they're all sits until we get more information. I'm kind of hoping for more clarity. If Najee is ruled out, at least we know what we're dealing with here going in to the weekend. How about their opponents, the Atlanta Falcons, Cordero Patterson, Tyler Algier? I just don't understand Atlanta. We had a comment last week on a video that asked if I thought that the Atlanta Falcons were tanking. But they're fighting for the division lead. They're like a half a game out of first place, so I don't think that they're tanking, but I just don't understand their thought process with not involving their best playmakers. I mean, why would they even tank? They don't even use the early draft picks that they've had the last few years with Kyle Pitts or Drake London. They don't use them. Why do they care about an earlier pick? We haven't even seen their young quarterback Desmond Ridder yet, so it's not like they're tanking for a quarterback. It's just very confusing for the Atlanta Falcons. Both these guys averaging right around 12 to 13 touches a game. It was nice to see Cordero Patterson go out and get 5 targets last week. That's definitely what we want to see each and every week, but that is the most he's had in a game since week 1. Both him and Algier on the ground splitting carries, 11 apiece. Now they're going against Pittsburgh. They allow 20.4 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, so not a bad matchup overall. Most of the injuries here should really be leading to more volume for Cordero Patterson, but we haven't really seen that as of late. Maybe this target increase, continues for multiple weeks, and that's definitely what we want from Cordero Patterson. Now, the Pittsburgh offense starting to look a little bit better. They're starting to put some points up on the board, which means Atlanta's going to have to do the same thing. In order for Atlanta to have a chance, it involves Cordero Patterson scoring a touchdown here this week. He's going to be a start, but a very low-end start. How about the Denver Broncos and Baltimore Ravens? And I'm really still in awe with how bad the Denver Broncos are. This team has only scored over 16 points one time since week 4. And Latavius Murray is arguably the best player on this team, and he didn't even start the season with them. What does that tell you right there? He's averaging right around 14 touches a game. Baltimore's allowing over 17 fantasy points per game, which is only 7th fewest in the NFL. Now, Mike Boone, he could return off of IR this week, but I really don't expect him to be a threat this week. This is a Latavius Murray revenge game. Remember, he was with Baltimore just last year. They're going to be on the road in Baltimore against a tough defense on a team that can barely score points with a bunch of hurt wide receivers, which means Baltimore can pin its ears back and go after the running game. There's not a whole lot here that I really feel warm and fuzzy about. I'm probably going to sit Latavius Murray here this week, even though he's like the only guy that can score a touchdown in Denver, it feels like. His opponents, Here's another backfield that I may like even a little bit less in this game. A touchdown-dependent back in Gus Edwards. A player that's obviously hated by his coach because his consistency is all over the place when it comes to touches in Kenyon Drake. And then Justice Hill, who is arguably the best statistical running back in this backfield all year long, and he can't even get a touch in a game hardly. This is not what you're looking for when you're looking at fantasy football options here. Now, obviously, it's clear to me that Gus Edwards is going to be the lead back when healthy in this backfield. Now they're going up against Denver. They allow over 18 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. The offensive line here still dealing with injuries. They really need Ronnie Stanley back. Plus, all of a sudden, J.K. Dobbins is able to start practicing here pretty soon. That's what we need, is another running back in the mix, but no, that doesn't really affect this game this week. I could easily see Gus Edwards scoring a touchdown in this game. I could also easily see Gus Edwards going out there and getting 16 carries for 62 yards and absolutely killing your fantasy chances. If I had to pick one, it's still Gus Edwards. And I kind of have this gut feeling that he's going to score, but in a split backfield like this and not an easy matchup, there's just too much that can go wrong, and I prefer to avoid them altogether. How about the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears? We'll start off on the Green Bay side with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. It was nice to see Aaron Jones put up some pretty solid numbers against a difficult defense in the Philadelphia Eagles just last week. He now has had at least 11 fantasy points in 5 of the last 6 games he's played, and now he gets Chicago, who he absolutely carved up in week 2 for 170 total yards and 2 touchdowns. We know Aaron Jones is going to see the majority of the touches in this backfield, even though it was nice to see A.J. Dillon finally do something in week 12 where he found the end zone. You know that little thing you see, like the little stick figure poking the thing saying, do something. Like, that's how we felt with A.J. Dillon forever, but now a matchup going up against Chicago. They allow over 24 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. That's 6th most in the NFL, and it seems like almost every single week this team is losing a member of its offense or defense for the year. The biggest question mark for me in this matchup for the Packers has to be the health of Aaron Rodgers. Now, he came out on the Pat McAfee show and says he's going to try to tough it out. He expects to be out there. But what if he's not? What if it's Jordan Love? Should we worry a little bit? Maybe slightly. We're kind of used to Aaron Rodgers checking the ball down to Aaron Jones and really helping us from a fantasy perspective. Do we see that from Jordan Love? Maybe not a whole lot. If Aaron misses some time, we could actually see some more carries on the ground from A.J. Dillon, but as of right now, Aaron Jones is the bigger playmaker in this backfield, and it looks like Aaron Rodgers is going to try to tough it out, so obviously we're starting Aaron Jones. How about their opponent, David Montgomery? And he now has back-to-back games of at least 12 fantasy points, averaging over 18 touches a game with no Khalil Herbert. And now his touches could increase maybe again this week. Now, he's on an offense that doesn't score a whole lot of points without Justin Fields, right? It's not like he's getting an abundance of touchdown opportunities each and every week. He needs big plays, but the Bears have no reason to rush back Justin Fields for basically a lost season at this point. Rest him up, make sure he's 100%, don't rush it back, play for the future, but they're going against Green Bay. And right now, everybody is running against Green Bay, and they're allowing 24 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs themselves. I think I could probably run for $125 right now. Maybe not. My back is still sore as all hell. But you know what I'm talking about. Now, most of the injuries on this team for Chicago is resulting in more volume for one David Montgomery. We just lost Darnell Mooney for the season. Justin Fields still questionable to play. Now, Monty only has one game all year in which he has over 100 yards rushing. Do you care to guess what game that was in? If you happen to guess week 2 against these Green Bay Packers, you are correct. You win the prize of, okay, there's no prize for knowing that, but you know what I mean. David Montgomery in line for another huge volume day, and that's going to make him a start once again. How about the Jacksonville Jaguars, Detroit Lions, Travis Etienne, everybody out there? Okay. Release sphincter. Unless you just ate Taco Bell, then keep that thing clinched up tight because you just never know what's about to happen. He escaped an injury last week, and a lot of people were a little bit worried that he didn't come back into the game, but then word came out that he was cleared to return. They just chose not to let him come back into the game for precautionary reasons. And that is a little puzzling to me because it was a close game. It's not like they were getting blown out. He could have been a vital part of that offense, especially when you saw all of his replacements come in and put up pretty solid numbers. But man, having the bye week and then a game in which he only played in 5 snaps is pretty tough to overcome for a lot of fantasy owners. Everyone saw, JaMycal Hasty come out there and do something. We're all thinking, man, that could be Travis Etienne right now, but it's not. But then we move forward to this week, and on paper, he has the Detroit Lions, and a lot of people are like, yes, Detroit Lions matchup. Probably not that great of a matchup, right? I mean, Detroit is playing so much better here as of late. They haven't allowed a running back to have more than 72 rushing yards over the last 5 games played. Now, when we look at Travis Etienne himself, it says that he's dealing with a sprained foot, no boot, no crutches, saying he's good to go. Hopefully that's the case. I talked to the doc, and he says he's like 60-40 right now, that there's still a chance that he could sit this week. So we're definitely paying close attention to those practice reports as the week goes on. If he is a full go by the weekend, once again, we're going to start him. If he's limited, if he's a game time decision, we may have to look at the next man up being JaMycal Hasty if Etienne were to sit, but that's just something we're paying close attention to. Like I said, maybe on the Saturday night live stream, Friday during the injury update video with the doc, maybe we have more information by then that we can give you. But right now, keep your fingers crossed. Their opponents, the Detroit Lions, Jamaal Williams, NFL rushing touchdown leader Jamaal Williams, and DeAndre Swift right now for the Detroit Lions, because it seems like DeAndre Swift is like an afterthought at this point. Once again, it is apparent that Jonathan Williams is the #1 running back for the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell is basically he's not literally telling you this, but he is basically telling you this, right? We've seen Jamaal Williams go out and have touchdowns in 4 of his last 5 games, and he hasn't scored less than 10 fantasy points in a game since week 7. As for DeAndre Swift, still peanuts, right? He's barely on the field. When he's on the field, he doesn't look half bad, and had an opportunity at a couple touchdowns last week that he could not capitalize on. But he has only had 10+ touches 1 time in a game since week 3, and that was in week 8. Now they're going against Jacksonville, who allows over 20 fantasy points per game, 18th in the league. The offensive line still somewhat hurting here with Jonah Jackson and Evan Brown, who are both questionable to play in this game. But the fact is this when it comes to Jamaal Williams. We knew in the preseason that this guy was going to have a role. He was a Dan Campbell type of player. He is an emotional leader of this team. He is a locker room guy, and he has had a role since week 1. This isn't like just some guy who got a role because somebody else got hurt. No, he had the volume, he had the touches, he had the opportunities since the beginning of the year, and now he just continues to capitalize week after week after week, and Jamaal Williams is the guy. Jamaal Williams is the safer start once again in this backfield. DeAndre Swift needs more volume, right? He's just not getting enough to be viable. He needs touchdowns each and every week, and we're trying to get to the point where we're getting some of that pass catching work back, at least 15 touches a game. We're not anywhere close to that right now for DeAndre Swift, so Jamaal Williams still the guy in Detroit. How about the Cleveland Browns and Houston Texans? This is a game I'm looking forward to watching, and how about that last week for Nick Chubb? Attaboy, Chubby. That's what I'm talking about. 26 carries for 116 yards and a tutty against the Tampa Bay defense. I will take that, especially after multiple difficult matchups here in a row for Nick Chubb. And now he gets the Houston Texans. Nick Chubb currently running back 4 overall, averaging 18 fantasy points per game, coming off a game in which he had 26 carries, which was a season high. Kareem Hunt, on the other hand, has only had over 7 touches in a game 1 time since week 5, so we're not overly worried about Kareem Hunt. Houston, they're still allowing a butt ton of fantasy points to running backs at 27.6 per game, most in the league. Offensive line still a little bit banged up, but I have to be completely honest here. You can see the X factor for both, which is basically my opinion. It's a 1. I can't make it any lower, really, unless I put a 0 in there, and I'll tell you exactly why. It's the return of Deshaun Watson for the Cleveland Browns. What is this offense going to look like now? I, personally, have to expect there to be a little bit of rust, right? He hasn't really played football for 2 years. I don't expect him to come out and throw 50 times in his first game on a team that is basically a run-first type of offense. However, his emotions are going to be high, going back to Houston, playing against his former team. There's a lot going on here, and I don't want to overhype Nick Chubb in a game that could really go a bunch of different directions. He's still a start for me nonetheless. As for Dameon Pierce, the free fall continues here, right down to running back 17. Over his last 2 games, he has a total combined yardage of only 33 total yards. No touchdowns either. 33 total yards in his last 2 games of the season. Last week, was it a shock? No, not really. We sat right here on this show and I said, hey, listen, if Miami gets an early lead, we may not see a whole lot of Dameon Pierce. I don't know if I was expecting the lead to get that big that early, but we really didn't see much of Dameon Pierce. Now they're going against the Cleveland Browns, though, which is a good opportunity for him to bounce back because he's still getting right around 18 touches per game on average for the year. And Cleveland allows the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs at 26.4 per game. This is a battle of the worst and the second worst run defenses in the NFL. That alone should be enough to say, hey, you know what? It's probably worth a stab to start this guy as well. There's still a team that's dealing with a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the football. Not really affecting Dameon Pierce's play, but here's what it is affecting. It's the game script, right? With this defense being banged up, it's really putting the Houston Texans behind early in ball games, and they're having to abandon the run. They need some of these defensive players to come back and be healthy. Like I said, though, this is the return of Deshaun Watson going back to Houston. There's so many variables in this game, but one thing is for sure, neither one of these teams can stop anyone on the ground, so I'm still going to start Dameon Pierce. How about the New York Jets and Minnesota Vikings? We'll start off with the Jets in another backfield I'm not that interested in whatsoever. Now, they did look way better. This team as a whole looked way better with Mike White under center, but I'm not about to crown them as some juggernaut after one game. This is still a team that has multiple issues as of right now. At best, this backfield is a 2-way split. At worst, it's a 3-way split. Even if we don't have Michael Carter, who suffered an injury, a low ankle sprain last week, even if he's not active, they'll probably reactivate James Robinson, who was a healthy scratch last week. That isn't exactly what we're looking for when we're trying to find fantasy options. 3-way split backfields are not a good thing, no matter what anybody tells you. It's not like this is a backfield that is just, given an abundance of touchdown opportunities, right? We can't supply multiple guys in this backfield. We're chasing touchdowns, and it could really be either one of these guys, and it's really hard to figure. It's like playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo in this backfield. Now, they're going against Minnesota. They allow the 12th most fantasy points to opposing running backs at 21.2 per game. We know that Carter is dealing with this low ankle sprain. There's a chance that he doesn't play, and if that's the case, who do we turn to? Well, next best, in my opinion, Zonovan Knight. Now, a lot of people may be going, the hell is Zonovan Knight? Did he miss? Is that supposed to say Donovan? No, his actual name, Zonovan Knight, which is pretty damn cool. If you're asking me, would be my guy who I would roll the dice with next if we do not have Michael Carter. If Michael Carter is a full go by the weekend, all systems go, no game time decisions, then I'm probably not going to start anyone here because they're all probably going to be, utilized in some form or fashion in this game. The offensive line still severely banged up. I can't count on what happened last week to happen every single week here just yet. Their opponents, Dalvin Cook and the Minnesota Vikings. He's currently running back 12 on the season, but now he's coming off back-to-back downers here. He can't seem to crack 8 fantasy points over his last 2 games, which is a problem. They were difficult matchups. He went up against Dallas and New England, 2 of the best run defenses in football. But how much easier is this one going to be? The Jets are pretty solid on defense. We know that volume really isn't an issue, right? Dalvin Cook's still averaging over 18 touches a game, but the Jets allow right around 19 fantasy points per game, which is 22nd in the league. They really need offensive lineman Christian Darrisaw back here on the offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings. He is one of the best offensive linemen in football, and you can tell without him on the field, that is a big, big loss. It hasn't been great for Dalvin Cook here as of late, but there's no way we can afford to sit a top 12 running back who averages over 18 touches per game. That's just not good form in fantasy football. I know it's been rough for the last couple weeks, but we can't afford to sit our studs at a critical time in the season. How about the Washington Commandos and New York Giants? The Washington Commandos, I said last week, was a team that it's just each week it's somebody different. It's going to be Gibby. It's going to be Brian Robinson. Who's it going to be? There's no rhyme or reason as to who is. I think rhyme or reason was the exact words that I used. I think they just came to my head again, so it had to be right. But another game of looking at the box score here for Washington and going, what the is going on? because there's no way to tell which one of these guys is actually going to see the volume each week. This past week just happened to be Brian Robinson, who outtouched Antonio Gibson 20-12, and he had himself I'm talking about an angry grown man touchdown run there in the receiving game. Now, both these guys averaging right around 15 touches a game. Going up against New York, they're allowing 20.9 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. That's 13th most in the league. Another team dealing with offensive line injuries, but when it comes to fantasy football, we try to establish consistency. There is no consistency as to who the guy is going to be in the backfield of the Washington Commandos. As of late, it seems to be trending a little bit more towards Brian Robinson. Will that continue? I have no freaking idea, but as of right now, he's the guy that I'll give the slight nod to and just hope that he can lead this team in touches, because whoever leads this team in touches is usually a pretty decent fantasy start each week. How about their opponent, Saquon Barkley? Another guy with back-to-back duds, and people are starting to panic when it comes to Saquon Barkley. He has barely been able to crack 50 total yards now in back-to-back games, which were difficult matchups, right? He had the Detroit Lions, who were playing great, and the Dallas Cowboys, but now he gets matchups going up against Washington, Philly, and then Washington again, and that is not ideal because Washington has been playing lights out when it comes to run defense, allowing only 17 fantasy points per game. Doesn't sound too bad, but that is 5th fewest in the NFL. We know the touches are going to be there though, but what we need is some like Austin Eckler level type pass catching work right now from Saquon Barkley. That's the only thing that can really make him a safer start. The problem is he hasn't had more than 4 receptions in a game since week 1, so the pass catching work hasn't really been there to help give us that safer floor. Not to mention they still have 4 offensive linemen who are questionable to play and a bunch of banged up wide receivers. Right now, Saquon Barkley is so reliant on the big play that I am worried about Saquon Barkley. This may be the week where I rank him lower than I have ranked him in quite some time. He is a borderline start, a low-end start, a boom or bust risk as of right now is Saquon Barkley in a difficult matchup. I just don't know if you can afford to sit a guy with a ceiling like Saquon, because you know he could win you your matchup. He's probably won you a couple of your matchups already this year. Hard to sit a guy with that ceiling. How about the Tennessee Titans and Philadelphia Eagles? We'll start off with Derrick Henry. You know you're starting Derrick Henry. But who would have thought that in a game that Derrick Henry played, he would be carried and saved by his pass-catching work? You heard that right. Last week, 3 receptions for 79 yards, should have been a touchdown, fumbled it in the end zone, was recovered by Treylon Burks, so he didn't get the fumble lost. You didn't get the negative points for that, but he also didn't get the touchdown either. But he now has set a career high in receptions and receiving yards and still has 6 games left to play. Now he's going up against Philly. They allow 21.8 fantasy points per game to running backs. This is a team that people are still trying to run on a lot. They're trying to limit offensive possessions from Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. How do you do that? You run the ball a lot successfully. You keep the clock moving, right? Because if the clock is continually moving, you're limiting the amount of opportunities that Jalen Hurts could have on offense. Now, center Ben Jones still questionable to play. Tennessee is going to feed Derrick Henry in this ballgame. It's going to be a whole lot of heavy Henry so we can have less Hurts in the Eagles offense. So obviously, you know, you're starting Derrick Henry. What about Miles Sanders? Of course, we're starting Miles Sanders once again. He's up to running back 13 on the year, and it's crazy what happens when you commit volume to Miles Sanders. He only has 2 games all year in which he has 100-plus yards rushing. Those are the only 2 games all year that he's had at least 20 carries in them. Now, on the season, averaging right around 17 touches per game, but man, what I would do some unspeakable things to get this dude some pass-catching work for sure. He only has a total of 5 targets over the last month of the season. This is not an easy matchup for him, though. Tennessee, they allow the 4th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs at 16.7 per contest. No other major injury concerns here, but this is a team that's going to give him scoring chances. He's inside the top 12 overall when it comes to rushing touchdowns at the running back position. He's going to need a touchdown here in this game, though, but it really depends on the success of Derrick Henry, right? And that may sound a little bit weird to you, but if the Tennessee Titans and Derrick Henry find a lot of success, we're going to have less opportunities for Miles Sanders to touch the football. That could limit those possessions. That could limit the touches for Miles Sanders, which is something he greatly needs. So that's where we're a little bit worried, but we're still starting Miles Sanders. How about the Seattle Seahawks, Los Angeles Rams? We'll start off with Kenneth Skywalker. And this dude, he has the tutty touch. That's what I'm going to call it, the tutty touch. 9 touchdowns in the last 7 games played. Had an overall down week last week in week 12, where he only had 26 rushing yards, but he scored 2 touchdowns, so no one gives a crap in fantasy football because he still scored you like 14 fantasy points last week in a bad game. He's averaging 15 touches a game. Now he's going up against the Rams, who ranked 24th in the NFL, allowing 18.7 fantasy points per contest, but this team is in shambles. They no longer strike fear into their opponent's eyes due to their defense. They are hurting. Even Aaron Donald is banged up right now. No other major injuries of concern here for Seattle, and even though he's a little touchdown dependent right now, I'll be damned if the chances to score aren't there weekly. At some point, the rushing yards are going to return, so we're going to still start Kenneth Walker. For the Rams, I even contemplated changing the graphics here because I don't think the word production should be anywhere near the Rams when we're discussing the Rams, because the word production is just not there, especially in the backfield. Everyone is hurt. No one is scoring. The defense is even hurting. Like I said, even Aaron Donald is hurt. We're on to the 3rd string quarterback at this point, and the offensive line is devastated. I don't want to start Cam Akers or Kyren Williams. Nothing against that. Well, maybe Cam Akers doesn't have anything left, but Kyren Williams is a prospect we like, but he's just set up to fail as of right now. Even Sean McVay is on the verge of getting knocked out by his own players who are running onto the field. That's how bad it is as of right now. We're not touching this backfield in LA. How about the Miami Dolphins and San Francisco 49ers? This is one of the matchups I'm looking forward to the most here this week. The ties are strong between the Dolphins and 49ers. Plus, we have a little bit of added drama, right? We know that Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson went to Miami from San Francisco. We know head coach Mike McDaniel came from San Francisco, and now all of a sudden we're hearing word of an interview with Raheem Mostert where he said that the San Francisco 49ers tried to rush him back from injuries, and he didn't like how they handled things, and then Kyle Shanahan fired back. Now we got drama on top of drama here. Both these guys are averaging right around 13.5 touches in Miami, though. We don't know right now how available is Raheem Mostert going to be, though. He missed last week. Jeff Wilson Jr. himself missed a part of the game last week, but that was due to cramps, so he should be good to go. But this is a difficult matchup. They're going up against San Francisco. They allow only 13.5 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, one of the fewest in the league. In fact, that is the fewest in the league. The offensive line took a huge blow last week for the Miami Dolphins. An injury to Terron Armstead. Austin Jackson is questionable to play. Like I said, at the time of this recording, we're still unclear whether or not Raheem Mostert is going to be ready to go. We could see a little bit of Myles Gaskin maybe this weekend if he's not. As of right now, though, Jeff Wilson's still the guy in this backfield. I wasn't overly concerned about an injury once we heard the story about cramps coming out, so Jeff Wilson Jr. seems to be the guy that we're looking at right now in this backfield. Their opponents is Christian McCaffrey, and now he's banged up as well. He's still sitting at running back 6, but he's another guy who's struggled now in back-to-back ball games. No touchdowns in back-to-back games either, and now we're having to worry about some injury concerns and what they're classifying it as knee irritation for Christian McCaffrey. What does that mean going forward? We really don't know what his availability is going to be as of right now. He's averaging 18 touches per game. Going up against Miami, they allow over 19 fantasy points per contest. Elijah Mitchell, he is out for multiple weeks. Jimmy G right now questionable to play with a knee injury himself. Now, I do expect him to play, but that's just a hunch as of right now. If you own Christian McCaffrey, you need to go out there and grab Jordan Mason just in case, because if CMC can't go, especially if there's issues with Jimmy G, we could be seeing a whole lot from Jordan Mason in this backfield. You may not even recognize the name, but he could be somebody who could have a huge day if there's no one else available. Plus, maybe you Debo owners can get a benefit of a few extra carries here this week potentially, which I know wouldn't hurt anyone's feelings whatsoever. How about the Kansas City Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals, Isaiah Pacheco, and the Kansas City Chiefs? Now you can see I've thrown up Melvin Gordon's name here, but there's no numbers there. The only reason I included him is so I didn't get 500 million questions down below as to, I wonder if this dude forgot about Melvin Gordon. Is Melvin Gordon playing? This dude doesn't know that Melvin Gordon's in Kansas City now. I know all of that, but it's not going to affect this week. And Isaiah Pacheco's been playing pretty well here as of late. 22 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown just last week. That's the most touches we've seen him have so far in his career. And he also set a career high in snaps played with 39. Now, over his last 3 games, averaging right around 17 touches per contest as being the lead guy in this backfield. Cincinnati allowing right around 19 fantasy points per contest. Most of the injuries here in Kansas City helping out Isaiah Pacheco get more touches. Guard Joe Thuney, he is questionable to play, though. That is a name we're paying attention to that could affect the running upside here of Isaiah Pacheco, but I'm sure hoping they continue to let this kid run the football. It's exciting to watch Isaiah Pacheco run the football. Like I said, I'm not worried about Melvin Gordon here this week. Maybe that's something we look at in the future, but as of right now, I'm hoping for Isaiah Pacheco and another game with 16 plus touches, and I got him in the start column. His opponent, we got Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine of the Cincinnati Bengals. This is one of those backfields that's kind of plug and play. Now, as of right now, at the time of this recording, Joe Mixon has not cleared concussion protocol. That does not mean that he will not play this weekend. He still has time. But right now, like I said, it's plug and play, right? If Joe Mixon is active, he's the guy we're starting this backfield. If he's not, we're plugging in Samaje Perine, who has proven he's another back that can go out and sustain 20-plus touches in a contest. Going up against Kansas City, they allow 20.5 fantasy points per game. That's 16th in the league, so basically the league average. Joe Mixon, like I mentioned, is trending towards playing, and also we could have Jamar Chase back in this matchup, which is great. But even though there's still some question marks, this is a matchup that could have a whole lot of fireworks, and I definitely want a piece of it. Whichever one of these guys starts is the guy that I want in my lineup, which will then take us to the Los Angeles Chargers and Las Vegas Raiders, my Manscaped matchup of the week. That's right, as soon as this video is over, head over to manscaped.com. The holiday season is right around the corner, and go get something for yourself, your significant other, but do it on a discount, right? Use promo code HEADLINERS at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. Get those presents figured out for the holidays right now before it's too late, and get it at this discounted price. But now back to this matchup, the Los Angeles Chargers and Las Vegas Raiders, the battle of running back 1 versus running back 2 overall in fantasy football. We'll start off with running back 2, Austin Ekeler. What does that tell you about Josh Jacobs? Right now, like I said, currently running back 2 overall after that huge Josh Jacobs day just last week. He's averaging right around 20 fantasy points per game. This is all about volume and opportunity, right? He's had touchdowns now in 7 of his last 8 games, has had 12 plus targets in 4 of his last 6 games, which that's what I'm talking about when it comes to fantasy football. But then it's a juicy matchup on top of that. You got the Las Vegas Raiders, who allow the 5th most points to running backs at 24.7 per game. They faced each other in week 1. Not a whole lot happened, but this is a different Austin Ekeler than what we saw in the first week. The offensive line still banged up. Corey Linsley and Trey Pipkins, they're questionable to play there on the offensive line, but this is all about the pass catching work. Did you realize he is only 10 targets away from setting a new career high with 6 games left? That's how much they're throwing the ball to Austin Ekeler, and he's definitely in your lineup. For Josh Jacobs, he is the new running back 1 in fantasy football. Was that like a WWE type entrance? Probably not, but it sounded good in my head. He's coming off a game in which he just went over 300 total yards and had 39 touches last week, in a week in which he was questionable with a calf strain. Now, we know he's getting the ball a lot. They're going up against the Chargers, who allow over 25 fantasy points per game, 4th most. And now, once again, they've come out and said that we're not expecting Josh Jacobs to practice very much due to a calf strain, in which he looked pretty freaking good with that calf strain just last week. Even when he jogged off the field, his calf strain looked to be pretty good. The volume is there. The matchup is there. As long as he's active and playing, Josh Jacobs is in your lineup. And then we'll go to Sunday Night Football, the Indianapolis Colts and the Dallas Cowboys. And we'll start off with Jonathan Taylor here for the Colts. He's currently sitting at running back 21. Has had 20-plus carries now in 3 straight games, touchdowns in 3 straight games, and has had at least 94 total yards in all 3 of those contests as well. Still, he's one of only 4 running backs in the NFL averaging 20-plus touches a game. Going up against Dallas is not going to be easy, though. They allow the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs at 17.2 per game. No other major injuries of concern here, but there's no way you can afford to sit this guy once he finally starts to score fantasy points. Even though the ending of that game was a little bit weird for the Colts, we're not sitting Jonathan Taylor. His opponent, Zeke Elliott, Tony Pollard. Now, all of a sudden, have you noticed this? That the seats on the bandwagon for Ezekiel Elliott, they were pretty empty for a while there, but now all of a sudden, people are appearing in the seats of Ezekiel Elliott and saying, he's not washed all of a sudden. I like Zeke. I've always liked Zeke. Not everybody's always liked Zeke, but now he has 4 straight games with a touchdown, and he just played in 51% of the snaps, which is the most since the game in week 6. Now, Pollard, he didn't do bad. He just had a down game with no touchdown and only 7 fantasy points. Both these guys still averaging 15 touches a game. The Colts, they allow over 20 fantasy points per contest, 15th in the NFL. No other main injuries of concern here for Dallas either. This is just one of those backfields that can support multiple running backs. Remember we talked about the Jets earlier? I said, listen, this is just not a team that can support multiple guys multiple weeks. Dallas is one of those teams. Both those guys have the opportunity to give you a safer floor and a crazy high ceiling, and maybe you had a James Conner, maybe you had a Donta Foreman, you're looking for a fill-in. Both these guys an option for you here this week, which will take us then to Monday Night Football, the New Orleans Saints, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What the hell is going on with Alvin Kamara? I mean, he's down to running back 16 overall and has 4 straight games now with under 10 fantasy points. On the season, sure, he's still averaging 18 touches a contest, but only 13 per game over the last month of the season. There's been a decline there, and he's had single-digit carries in 3 of his last 4. Plus, on top of all of that, dude lost 2 fumbles last week. He didn't fumble and his teammate recovered. He lost 2 fumbles last week. That's -4 points for a lot of you out there. Now they're going up against Tampa Bay. They allow only 16.4 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. And no, Alvin Kamara is not Nick Chubb. That matters a lot more for Alvin Kamara. They say he's healthy, but I just don't know if he is. Is he just not there right now? I just don't know why the switch has been flipped to off for Alvin Kamara, because something just doesn't seem right. It's hard to sit a stud like this, very similar to Saquon Barkley. He is a verge start, a high-risk, high-reward start, a very boom or bust start, and it's going to be a lot lower in my rankings than he has been the last few weeks. And then lastly, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You got Leonard Fournette, you got Rachaad White. At this point, we don't know for sure about Leonard Fournette. When he was injured, they didn't expect him to miss any time. We know he didn't play last week, so I would have to think that we could see him here this week. And Rachaad White wasn't bad without Leonard Fournette, but he needed 9 catches for 45 yards through the air to have a somewhat decent day. The groundwork is going to be hard to come by because this offensive line is just destroyed. Both these guys averaging over 16 touches per game when given the full workload. Fournette maybe a little bit higher, closer to that 18 mark. New Orleans, they allow 18.4 fantasy points per game, 8th fewest in the NFL. As of right now, Leonard Fournette is still questionable to play. So is guard Luke Gadecki. And they just lost offensive tackle Tristan Wirfs, probably their best offensive lineman. This was already an offensive line dealing with issues, and now they've lost their best offensive lineman for multiple weeks. Now, I know a lot of people out there are quick to crown Rachaad White. I've seen a ton of comments about how great Rachaad White is. He hasn't been that great. I mean, he's averaging 10.5 fantasy points per game, which is way better than nothing, right? That's way better than what Fournette has done the past couple weeks, but I'm not going to go out there and just crown this guy as the second coming of somebody who just get 25 touches a week because he's that great. He's really not. He's volume dependent, just like Leonard Fournette. Neither one of these guys are going to find holes to run through whenever they're on the field because the offensive line is in shambles right now. They need the pass catching work, and both of them are capable of getting it. Right now, if Leonard Fournette starts, he's the guy I start in this backfield. If Leonard Fournette sits, then I start Rachaad White. That's just the way it is. I don't want to start Rachaad White with a healthy Leonard Fournette. It just doesn't work out fantasy-wise. There's not enough touches to go around in that backfield because we're not relying on the ground game. We're trying to just hope for the pass-catching game, and both of them aren't going to get 9 targets a week. Sorry. Mini Rachaad White rant there, but I just see a lot of people getting overly excited about Rachaad White, and don't get me wrong, I like Rachaad White. I do. If it was just his backfield and his alone, different story. But it's just not right now, and Leonard Fournette is going to be a part of this offense when he's healthy, whether you like it or you don't. But for right now, we just have to wait and see how available he's going to be here. Make sure you pay close attention to the Doc's injury update video on Friday for that. All right, but there you have it, my starts and sits for the running back position here. Week 13 fantasy football. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. Hopefully you learned something today. If you did, do me a favor, hit that like button down below. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. We greatly appreciate all the support from you, Headliner Nation. I'm going to get out of here and go ice my back because it is hurting like a mother sitting here in this chair for this long. But hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day, a great week, and we'll talk to you later.